Anyway, LC from Rochester, New York. What are your top 3? I remember where I was when I saw that live moments in wrestling. For example, my number 1 spot would go to the dual broadcast where Shane McMahon walked out on Nitro and Vince was on Raw. I remember it because I got in trouble since my mother wanted me to take the garbage out at that very moment. And because there was no DVR, I would not dare leave, as my brother had Nitro on one TV and Raw was on the TV in the other room, and I was standing in the hallway watching both and refused to move. That is, until my mother threw a shoe at me. What about you? So I thought about this. I mean, there's a lot of moments like that where I kind of remember where I was. Maybe I was even at the show. Yeah, I've been to, at this point, I don't know, seven or 8 WrestleManias, I think. But the 3 that stood out to me, and a lot of them go back to when you were a kid or when you were a younger wrestling fan. The first one is Ric Flair winning the Royal Rumble in '92. And I've told the story before about being at school. We were on break during recess or something, and there was a phone booth in the hallway downstairs. And I come downstairs, and I see all these kids huddled in and around the phone booth, and I can't imagine what the hell they're doing in there. So I go over, and I ask somebody, and they're like, oh, he's calling the wrestling hotline. And I hear them talking amongst themselves that Ric Flair is going to win the Royal Rumble. I had no idea how he knew this, but I remember watching the Rumble pay-per-view live at my grandfather's house because they had cable and we still didn't at home. I didn't get cable until '95. So all the stuff I was watching was on tapes that they taped for me, or I'd be at their house. It was a lot easier once I finally got cable. My first pay-per-view was the Survivor Series in '95. I mean, I had seen, that wasn't my first pay-per-view that I watched, but the first one I was actually able to watch at home in my own house wasn't until the Survivor Series in '95, and I've been watching wrestling since, oh my God, 86, 87? Anyway, I remember watching the Rumble live at my grandfather's house and saying, Ric Flair is going to win the Royal Rumble. And when Flair actually won the Royal Rumble, I felt like I was the smartest guy in the world. It was like, I was so happy. I don't even know who I wanted to actually see win the match. If I was rooting for Hogan or somebody else, but when Flair won, you couldn't surgically remove the smile from my face. I was so happy I'd gotten it right. So I remember that. I remember the Hell in a Cell match between Undertaker and Mankind from the King of the Ring in '98. I remember watching it live at home, and my father was home, and he was watching it with me. He was sitting right behind me. I was on the floor. And when he threw Foley on that first big bump off the cell, we had the same reaction, like holy shit reaction. I remember turning around and looking at him and the look on his face, like we couldn't believe it. We thought this guy was dead. So I vividly remember that. And the third one is a sad one, but I remember everything about that night that Owen Hart died. I was watching the pay-per-view from my friend's house. He had the old, the black boxes with the scrambled signal and all that. So I'd go over to his house, and we were watching Over the Edge that night. And I remember when, they were about to have the Intercontinental title match with the Blue Blazer and the Godfather, and they came back, and they have the graphic on the screen, and you hear Jim Ross basically stuttering and saying, we got big problems out here. And I don't know that I picked up on it at first. I might have been talking to my friend or something. They showed the Owen Hart promo from earlier with Kevin Kelly. And then they cut to the crowd shot, and they explain what's going on. And I remember we're watching this, and, we couldn't believe it. We couldn't believe this was happening. And we're just kind of talking amongst ourselves like it's not, I don't know that it's real to us at that point. And I remember saying to him, oh boy, if he's really hurt, that's a hell of a lawsuit that this company is going to have on their hands. Like, we're talking like that. Not at all, I think, thinking that they're going to announce later that this guy is dead. And when they did, later in the show, because it was a couple more matches before they made the announcement on TV, it was just, I stuck around for the rest of the pay-per-view, although I don't think, it was very quiet in the room. I don't really think we were talking. And I was waiting because when the event was over, I think he gave me the tape. I still have the tape. I have the VHS tape up in my closet. And I I used to put all the labels, I would have fixed the labels on the side of the tape and everything, and I still have it up there. I remember writing WWF Over the Edge 1999. I put the date on there. And then I drew like a little tombstone on the sticker. so that anytime I would look at the tape, I knew exactly what it was. But I remember when the event was over, I walked home, because he lived maybe 6 or 7 blocks away from me. And that's when it really hit me. I had met Owen less than a year earlier. You guys have seen the photos on my Twitter. And it was a brief meeting. I mean, we were in the luxury box with him probably for, 15, 20 minutes. And it was the only time I ever met him, and he took a picture with me and was the nicest guy. Could not have been nicer. Everybody's leaving out of the luxury box, Foley and Luna and Mark Henry, to go to the next one. This is in the hour before Raw was about to go on the air. And Owen was the only one who stopped and turned around before he left and said, "Anybody need pictures? Anybody need pictures?" And I don't think anybody even heard him. They were all buzzing and talking to each other, but I saw this and I was almost embarrassed to say anything. And my friend and my mother was there, and she's like, "Go ahead, say." And I'm like, "Okay." I raised my hand, and he came over, and we took a picture and the whole thing. So my brief experience with Owen was a positive one. And, now I just got done watching a pay-per-view where this guy fell from the ceiling and died. And it's starting to hit me. And I remember keying into the house, and I start, the tears are starting, and I can hear the television on upstairs. And I go upstairs, and my brother and my mother are there together, and they're watching the news. The 11 o'clock news just came on, and they're talking, and maybe in the teaser for the news, they were saying a professional wrestler died, but they hadn't really said who it was yet. And I remember walking in, and I think it was my mother who said, "Hey, a wrestler died." And I just lost it. She couldn't understand what the hell was going on. And then I told her, and it was awful. And then the newscast came on, and it was the lead story in all the local newscasts, at least here in New York. And this didn't even happen in New York, so I would think throughout the country it was probably the lead story in a lot of newscasts that night. But I just lost it, and that was awful. Yeah, that was a bad night. So those are the 3 big ones that really stand out to me in my mind.